An age ago, the beating heart of our people was a king who knew only victory. He wanted nothing more than an honorable death on the battlefield. Yet, none could match him, and so he wandered the earth, becoming lost in time and tide. Then we too lost our honest purpose, while silk-clad men sat upon the throne. But tremble now, all cities that lay under the stars, for out of the shadows and mists of the land of promise, our courage has been rekindled, our heart has returned, and the world will burn.
Hey, how's everybody doing tonight? If someone could just give me a shout out in the comments really quickly, let me know that you hear me. There's a couple of people I know are here already. Michael was here, Final Fantasy is here, Vaz is here. So if someone could just give me a quick shout out in the comments to let me know that you can hear me. I'm always a little bit hesitant of starting a live stream just because of that time a couple of years ago where I talked for an hour and didn't hit unmute. Question mark says you can hear me fine. Finals Fantasy says loud and clear. Glad to hear. All right, so I'm going to do my normal Wednesday night stream. I'm going to talk a little bit about, give you an update on my crowdfunding comics and graphic novels, and then I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes about making comics and appreciating comics. And what I like to do is to go back to the old fun traditional way of making comics. That's partly why I call this series now Make Comics Fun Again, because that's part of what is missing within comics, trying to make things fun, good entertainment, all that kind of stuff. And after that, I will answer your questions and comments, and I'll go through the list. So if you want to ask me anything about what I have to say tonight, about my crowdfunded comics, about my channel, any of my videos, anything, you go ahead and post that in the comments, and I will get to that after I go through my spiel of about 20 minutes or so. And just put a question mark or tag me in it for the comments, just so I can see and that you're not talking to each other in the comments, that you're asking me a question. So very quick update on The Valiant Heroes, which is my superhero graphic novel, the latest one, which you can order, and the link for that is in the description. The whole book, in case you don't know, is made up of three main stories, which can also be bought as floppies. So you can buy each of the floppies as $8 books, or you can buy them all together. And there is an addition of a backup story if you buy it as the graphic novel. Now, the one that Renzo was working on, which is the main artist that I work with, which is The Redemption of Kit Fox, that is now done. We're going to the printers with it very soon. We're working on the second one, which is the title, the marquee story, which is The Valiant Heroes. We're now getting the last pages of that colored, and we'll move straight on to lettering, which only takes about a week with Eric. So he's really fast on that, which is good. And at the same time, I'm going to get the last story, which is the Rampaging Thor, colored at the same time. So we're moving fairly quickly with that. The backup story has been done for a long time, so that's going to go straight in the book. So we're moving pretty quickly on that. Hopefully we'll get printing on the floppies for each of those pretty quickly over the next couple of weeks, and then move into the printing of the graphic novel. So that's just an update there. Also, there's a link in the description for Crom the Destroyer, which is my latest campaign, which is a return to form for low fantasy. So again, all the links for those are in the description if you want to go and check those out. So tonight, I really wanted to talk about something that was much more personal to me and my experience with making comics. And it's something that I've said on these live streams before, but I really want to stress it this time and do a little more about it. And it's the fact that if you're someone who wants to write comics, and that can be someone who's an artist or someone who is just a writer, the thing is that, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but I'm at the same time not putting anybody down because I'm including myself in this as well. But no one cares. Just let you know right off the top, no one cares about you as the writer. Honestly, there may be a handful of people, and I know there are a handful of people for me that want to get my stuff because of my writing. I know exactly who they are, but those handful of people are not going to be enough to support the creation of a book. So yeah, even with me, I have what, I don't even know what my subscriber count is right now for this channel. Is probably 23,000 or so. But still, no one cares about me as a writer. It's all about the art. And as long as that happens, you're going to have a very interesting dynamic in making a comic. And partly what I wanted to talk about that was the fact that I think I really understand much better now Stan Lee and how he got into making comics, because it's kind of the same thing of what I have been doing. And I didn't mean this to happen at all, because Stan Lee started off as he wanted to write novels. He couldn't do that, so he got into the publishing. It was basically a family business, and it was publishing for comics. He helped write the stories, but writing is a very loose way to put it, because he basically set up the storyline and just gave a simple plot. That was the Marvel method. Give the simple plot to the artist, and that the artist then take that and run with it as much as possible. Then they would write the script for the entire book after all of the art had been done. But my point being that I think I understand Stan Lee better, because I started off by writing novel manuscripts myself, and I wanted to get those published. But I realized that within today's heavily, quote unquote, progressively controlled system of, well, basically the entire book publishing system has been controlled by that mafia for much longer than comics has been, for at least the last almost 18 to 20 years now, at least. So I wasn't going to get my novel published. And so I moved into comics when that chance arose to do crowdfunded comics. I moved right into that, which is kind of parallel to what Stan Lee was doing. But when you see Stan Lee, and when people think about Stan Lee, they don't think about Stan Lee as the writer, not Stan Lee, the writer. No one thinks about that. Here, let me put up some art in the background while I'm talking. I'll put up some art from, well, I'll put up some, since we're talking about Stan Lee, let's see what we got here for some good. I got some good panels here. Let's see. We'll just show a couple of things that I've been showing over the last couple of weeks. These are nice panels from Marvel and DC, just in the background. And I'll just re-up a couple of those on the way, and then I'll show you some of my stuff. But anyways, when you think about Stan Lee, you think about Stan Lee, the creator of Marvel Comics, even though he never really created it. Again, it was a family business, but he helped shape it so much that he can be called the creator of Marvel Comics. No one really thinks about Stan Lee, the writer. Very few people think about Stan Lee, the writer. And there's several reasons for that. I know struggles between him and other artists, people saying he didn't write much, all that kind of stuff. But again, my point being that if you're trying to get into writing comics, graphic novels right now, again, no one's going to care about you as the writer. I think some other person that is in the same boat as me is like Micah Curtis. He has produced probably about half a dozen graphic novels and comics by this time, but he's in the same boat as me, and he realized this probably about a year before I did. And it's that, again, as a writer, no one cares about you. it's the artist that's going to draw everybody in. It's a visual medium. It's the artist, and you can have the best story in the world. If you don't have a good artist working with you, no one's going to care. And so you need to transition if you're a writer, anyways, like me, you need to transition into writer slash producer of comics. And that's part and parcel of what I'm doing now. It's trying to gain, well, not just trust with the reader, but also as many contacts as I possibly can with other people in order to produce comics. And I got a kick in the pants, a couple of weeks ago saying, you got to be more serious about this. And just talking to people that I work with. And it's not that I wasn't serious to begin with, it's more, I have to put more effort into it in a concentrated way, stop doing everything all over the place. I need to focus and all that kind of stuff. But because I've been drawing on a lot of these connections that I've made over the last couple of years. And those connections, a lot of them came through Don Jin, great guy, Don Jin. He has his own channel. I don't know if he does videos anymore. I haven't seen one in a little while. But anyways, Don Jin is a great indie comic producer from the 1980s. He did some beautiful work with Eclipse and other comic producers. But anyways, I got to talking with him and we got to working together because I wanted to do stuff with him. We've written a story together, and that will appear as the backup story for the Valiant Heroes #2, which, by the way, Renzo is working on right now. He's sending me pages, the first couple of pages for that. But so just to let you know that that's in the works already. But I got done, and he had connections with so many people from back in the day. Who's the writer? I mean, the artist for Sandman that most people would think about, Neil Gaiman's Sandman. He actually broke into comics by working with Don Chin and doing a fantasy story with him. Great fantasy story that they published with Eclipse. Anyways, and he knows other people. He got me in contact again, as someone was talking about last week, with some of the artists for ElfQuest, all that kind of stuff. So it got me into some connections with people, and besides that, I have my own connections just by doing my videos with people like Renzo and Nick Axe and Jim O'Reilly. Those are my artists for my various books right now. And Mike Gustovich, who again is an old 80s comic inker and penciler for Marvel Comics and for DC Comics. He worked on pretty much every superhero in their own continuity that you can think of, traditional superheroes like Batman, Superman, Avengers. He did Conan for a bit. He did Hulk, all these kinds of heroes that you would know. Anyways, so those people contacted me directly saying, I want to do something with you. And again, those things are part and parcel of producing a comic, getting to know people who are inkers and letterers, all these kind of things. But again, the core of what I'm trying to say is that no one cares about you as a writer. That's not going to cut any ice with anybody. So you need to become someone who understands the production of comics. And at the same time, that would include all the stuff that I'm going over in this last couple of weeks, at least, about creating comics, about the Will Eisner great way of making comics, about the advice from people who worked at Image, to Neil Adams, to Frank Miller, to everybody, go to Stan Lee and his How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, and all these kinds of things. Someone pointed out, again, I'll have to concentrate more on the How to Make Comics the DC Way, which is, who the heck wrote that book off the top of my head? Well, I can't think off the top of my head. Someone would probably put that in the comments for me. But so part of the reason why I'm talking about this is because since I'm looking for and have been looking for a whole lot of older interviews and things like that for comic greats, and to grasp the way that they made comics as much as possible, I've been doing that on YouTube as well, looking at videos as well as reading a whole lot of other stuff that I can find. But YouTube is starting to shove a lot of stuff at me about how to make comics. So you get these people who make webtoons and webcomics, or basically their own graphic novel, things like that. And I have yet to see one of these videos that I clicked on where they're actually talking as a writer. I can't find one. It's always, well, first of all, these videos are I don't know how much they will help you. I don't know why I still click on them, because most of the time they're artists, and they're artists who are probably Gen Z, if that. And most of the stuff that they have to say as advice is just general life advice and general work advice. How in the world these people don't know these general life things and general work things, I have no idea. Things like, you have to set yourself up time to work on it. And I'm thinking, well, duh, and all this kind of thing. It's, make yourself a schedule and stick to it. I'm thinking, it's work. Of course, you make yourself a schedule and work. I don't understand why these people don't actually have these skills to begin with and have to tell other people about these skills. It's basically, well, I suppose I'm always talking about heroes and the heroic ideal and how it's based on virtue, and virtue is based on habit. And that idea of habit has been broken down so much in our society. I suppose I can understand why these people don't have good work habits or anything like that. But anyway, my point being that one of the things that they always talk about is you need to write the script first, because you can't just do the art without any kind of script or story that you are actually sticking to. And I'm thinking to myself, how do you not know this? But at the same time, the whole point is it's about the artist, and it's an artist that needs to write a story. Now, the flip side of the fact that no one cares about you as a writer is the fact that, and let me put up, well, are these, I'm not sure. I'll put up some different art in the background in a minute. But the point is that one of the things that the 90s has taught us with mainstream comics and Image, and those guys from Image that, I was talking about them last week about how they incorporated different things into comics and brought us back to different ways of looking at panels, all that kind of thing. So they did bring in some new things that were good. But at the same time, I think all of those guys definitively proved without a doubt that just because you're a good artist doesn't mean you can write a story. Really, that's the flip side of the entire thing. So, as a writer, no one cares about you. But if you're just an artist and you try to write the story, that's not gonna cut it. I'm sorry, but, I bought that Image stuff from the very moment it hit the spinner rack or the shelves of my comic book shop. I have the first runs of everything from Image, and it was good art for most of the time, but the stories were just awful. They were horrendous. And you know, it started off with it was Todd McFarlane working for Marvel, and then getting his art recognized in such a way he became almost a superstar at Marvel. And then he got the company to say, yeah, sure, you can write it now, because he was pushing for that. And then Rob Liefeld tried to catch up to him and did the exact same thing. And then you got the other artists doing the exact same thing. And when these people were put on writing duties, I'll put up some more art in the background. Just one second here. These are just general things we've been looking at over the last couple of weeks. But as I was saying, when these people got onto writing for these comics, yeah, they just went downhill. And that's part of the reason why I left mainstream comics at the time that I did. It was the time of Marvel's, I'm not sure what is it called, Marvel's Heroes Reborn, because at that time they said that the Heroes Reborn was going to be the mainstream of Marvel comics moving forward. That was like 1996, 1998 ish. And, right now they say, oh no, it was just an experiment that they were trying and they never meant to make it the real comic. Yeah, that's not what they said when they were coming out. And the point was that they started these heroes anew. All the continuity was gone. Everything that was connected to those old stories was gone. All my back collection of stories were no good to connect to the new stories. And at the same time, these Image writers, who are now taking over the main titles for Marvel, again, were writing the stories, and they were awful, horrendous. That Rob Liefeld Captain America was just the worst Captain America story I had ever read in my life. It was bad. It was things he did things. One of the stupidest things in that comic to me was how Falcon, because Falcon appeared from, I think it was like issue 2 or 3, might have even been 1. But how he got his superpowers was that Captain America cut open his hand and allowed him to drink some of his blood like a vampire. And then he got some of the super soldier serum and he became a superhero. It was ridiculous. But anyways, my point being that again, no one's going to care about you as a writer, but at the same time, just because you're an artist doesn't mean that you're going to be able to write a good story. Richard over at Comics Matter did a good video this last week talking about the creator for what was it, The Walking Dead, and about how he thinks himself to be this great writer. But it really wasn't him to begin with. It was the artist that drew everybody into that comic. It was the art. And I would agree completely. And the same thing, I'll have to go back to and talk about great writers for Marvel, like Chris Claremont. Okay. I would say that everybody talks about Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men. They should not, I don't think, talk about it in those terms. They should talk about it in terms of Claremont and Byrne run on the X-Men, or the Claremont and Smith, or the Claremont and Lee, or the Claremont and Silvestri, because each of these artists actually brought more to the table than Chris Claremont did. Now, successively, Chris Claremont brought more and more. But at the beginning, I think it was Terry Austin we started with. But yeah, it was, maybe 1/4 the storyteller and 3/4 the artist. And certainly after he moved into with John Byrne, yeah, it was like the majority, 80% at least, that everyone was drawn to that book because of John Byrne. And yes, they got a good story with Chris Claremont, but nobody cared that it was Chris Claremont. Chris Claremont had written other things for Marvel. Nobody cared about him. And again, the reason why he became such a big name was because of his continued work on the X-Men and drawing all the storylines forward and connecting everything, all that kind of stuff, doing other work for other venues, stuff like that. And again, it got bigger and bigger as he continued on X-Men. But at the same time, it was John Byrne that drew everybody there. It was Paul Smith that drew everybody there. It was Jim Lee. It was Mark Silvestri. All these guys. They were the big draw for that. It was the artist. So that was, even for Chris Claremont, that was still true. So it's certainly going to be true for you, for me, for anybody who is trying to make comics right now. And that is a giant hurdle to get over and to think about when you're actually wanting to be a writer for comics. And right now, it's bizarre. I've covered this in the main part of my channel with my videos about how Marvel was trying to and still tries to attract talent as writers to Marvel. I actually did a couple of videos on their hiring processes, going over some of the stuff that they post online, all that kind of stuff. They really, the majority of what they draw from is either YA authors, so people who have experience writing, but not comics. So the comic medium is completely foreign to them, which means they're not going to be good comic writers. And at the same time, as I said at the first of this video, the YA industry and the main novel industry was taken over by your heavy, quote unquote, progressives, that is to say, agenda driven people, long before it ever got into comics. So that's all you get from YA novels, because that's what you're going to get when they bring these people from YA novels into Marvel. So you're not going to get someone who's looking at the story first, even though they're an author, and there's someone who can and does write books and other kinds of stories. They don't concentrate on being a heavy progressive, someone who is ideological driven. They concentrate on the ideology first and then the story second. And the other main draw that they get for writers is just picking out people that have no business writing a story whatsoever. It's because of, most notably, someone has identity markers that they want to say, yes, we have this kind of person with, it's a female and an immigrant, and her skin is this color, and she has these other intersectional things going on. Yeah. That doesn't make you a good writer. And at the same time, they do the same or similar things to people who are celebrities. Again, I was talking about within one of my videos, they had somebody from Black Eyed Peas write some Spider-Man stories just because they now right now have the girl who is playing Kamala Khan on the television and in the movies. And they said to her, here, you take this character and write a new Kamala Khan series. She's never written anything in her life. So you're not going to get good stories from these people. And there is a small sliver of people who they select from. Yes, I've written a comic before, but again, then you got to go through the ideological strain of, yes, proven that I'm going to put the ideology first before the story. So again, you're not going to get anything from the mainstream comics right now. And it doesn't matter if you are writing comics or things like that on the internet. So my point again being that you don't look for that as a goal. You look for merit as a goal. But even looking for merit as a goal, and you have the best stories imaginable as a writer, it doesn't matter, because that's not going to be the greatest draw. So kind of what I'm trying to get at here is something that Mike Barron talked to me about when I was talking to him on the interview that I did with him on my channel. He said, as a writer, because he's basically a writer, so you have some people who are fairly big names as writers just because they've been that way and been writers for, 30, 40 years now. So they have some backing, like Mike Barron, like Chuck Dixon, people like that, people I've talked to. Mike Barron said, as a writer, you at the very least need to understand the process of drawing well enough so that you can lay out panels and even give basic character sketches in these panels and things like that. And again, that's what you're going to have to do, he says, in order to be a good comic writer. But at the same time, I would say the opposite is the case as well. If you're someone who's an artist and you're just not a writer and you're jumping into making comics and you don't actually have the chops of writing anything, you're going to have to go back to, I would say, the greats of literature, just to understand where these stories come from and how great stories are created. I myself, I'm writing Crom the Destroyer, and in order to get myself into the mindset to do that, since he is a recreation of several Robert E. Howard characters, trying to go back to the original ideas that inspired those characters, I listened to basically the written stories, the recorded stories of Robert E. Howard as much as possible. But when I did that again and listened to it instead of reading it, I noticed just how much not only it's influenced by Irish mythology, which is partly where everything he creates is drawn from, but Shakespeare as well. You can see the great lines of Shakespeare within the way that Robert E. Howard actually writes some of his dialogue, writes some of his introductions, all that kind of thing. And so you have to be able to recognize the fact that even though you have these great pulp writers or comic writers or things like that, that they draw on these older traditions, and you need to be able to understand where these older traditions come from as an artist that wants to write a story. So there's all of that, and I do have even more to talk about. I don't know. I should check up on everybody in the comments, but I really wanted to keep going on this subject, so I don't have to break it into two. So part of this entire thing is that you need to understand all of this, because, as I'm always saying within my videos, that if you have a story and the art that are pulling in the same direction and understand each other, an artist and a storyteller that understand each other, even if you're one and the same, or if you're two different people, there are things that are going to limit you and things that need to be changed around in order for those two things to work together in sequential art. Now, one of these things that I'll just give you an example of this. Okay. And this is an example that is very relevant to my books, because for Crom the Destroyer and for this lady you see right here in the background that just popped up right now. I'll put some Crom the Destroyer in the background as I talk about this. This is Cardinal, and you see she has a sword in her hand. And certainly when you see Crom the Destroyer, he has a sword in his hand most of the time as well. So what I'm talking about is the fact that one of the things about sequential art is that it depends upon the ability of the reader to move from panel to panel and infer movement between those panels and in those panels themselves. So you need to, as much as possible, put dynamic qualities within your art. Here I am talking about dynamic qualities, and there's nothing up but a static image. Okay, here we have the cover for Crom the Destroyer. Okay, you can see the dynamism of this, that there is movement. He's in midair, about to strike, all this kinds of thing. And this is a very, very good picture to talk about this, because The dynamic pose within sequential art, the best way to do it is to take the body's center of gravity and to stretch them out as much as possible. That will signal dynamism in every way that you want to do it. So basic centers of gravity would be, you have the head and then the chest and then the pelvis, and each one of the limbs themselves has their own center of gravity, which would be the joints. So you got your elbow, you got your shoulder, elbow, and then wrist. And so you try to stretch those out as much as possible. That's why you get superhero poses, right? That's why you get these poses where Superman has one hand cocked back and the other one that's stretched out in front of him, one leg sometimes that's pulled forward, the other one out straight, and all these kinds of things. It's stretching out those center points as much as possible to show a dynamic quality within the what is essentially a 2D picture. And you're supposed to infer all of that movement from this 2D picture, and that's what helps it. But at the same time, as someone who is, well, basically, I was trained in martial arts when I was younger, and we did weapons training as well. And I do know a little bit also about, not as someone who was trained in it, but just interest as a sport in things like kendo. And I know that some of the basic things of, let's say, kendo, and your fighting, your basic martial fighting, and it doesn't matter with what weapons, is the fact that you need to present yourself as a combatant as small a target as possible. And for things like kendo, your footwork is almost, I would say, like 60-75% of what you need to learn in order to actually just participate in this sport correctly. And that's the thing. You need to have a very rooted stance in how to stand and how to strike, all these kinds of things. Make yourself very small. That is the exact opposite of what you would need for dynamism on a page, especially when someone has a sword in their hand, which again, we're talking about Crom the Destroyer. You're looking at art from Crom the Destroyer, right? The whole point of the sequential art is to take those points and stretch them out as much as possible. But the whole point of what a good story is, which is a representation of reality, is the opposite of that, is to give you the smallest target possible. And again, with footing that's going to be solid on the ground, all these ideas of jumping in the air and striking with a sword, again, which you're going to see in comics, that doesn't really play into reality in any way. So you have to have a balance between these two. And the reason why I wanted to talk partly about this was because, again, the agreement, or at the very least, the working together of your story and your art needs to have some kind of basis of reality, or at the very least, some exception to what is going on. That's why, again, you go over to Crom the Destroyer. Link for it is in the description, the Indiegogo page. You can read 11 pages, I think it's 11 or 12 pages that I posted with dialogue for that book, because the book is 66 pages minimum. And so you can read those pages and you can see from those pages that I do stretch it out a little bit. Why? Because the whole point is to show that our main character, he's the king that you're looking at right in the screen right now, is the fact that he actually fents a whole lot because he's been on the battleground so long. Fenting is a swordplay term, which basically means you make like you're going to attack, but you really don't attack, so that your opponent will then try to counterattack. And as he counterattacks, you'll hit him with a secondary attack from a place that he's not going to be aware of, which then you get a hit. So that's what my character does a lot, because he's fairly old at this point. He's been on the battlefield for so long, he can calculate things before they happen. And that's what he does. He feints. He makes like he is doing something stupid because he knows that it's going to draw in his opponents to strike at him in a way that he can then turn it around on his opponents. So again, it's part of the story. So I'm making that dynamism that I need to put into the sequential art for Crom the Destroyer, where he is stretching himself out all the time as if he doesn't know exactly how to fight, as part and parcel of the story itself, to explain why he does these things, to make himself look like he doesn't know what he's doing. And then he strikes his opponent as if it was a feint. That is to say, that wasn't the real attack, and so he does it, and he becomes the person who actually wins. And the same thing, or similar, with the cardinal character that I have for the Valiant Heroes, and Thomas Valiant #2. Again, the Valiant Heroes. You can go and look that up and see. She's the one in red on the Valiant Hero page. For the links for those are in the description. The point being that I purposefully made her powers in a way that she has some ability to gain more flexibility and what is it? What is say flexibility and strength and the ability to move basically. So she can move in a very dynamic way because of her powers, which means that when she uses her sword, she doesn't use it in the traditional way. Because again, that wouldn't be good storytelling visually. So you got to explain it in a way that's going to be connected to the story, even though I don't give a technical explanation in any way. It's just something that I actually put in as the backstory, and it's just going to be expressed as part of that. So, anyways, that's my spiel, and I've been going on way too long about this tonight, but it's really something that I think needs to be said. That again, no one cares about you as a writer, so you're going to have to incorporate a whole lot of artistic skills into your skill set in order to become a good comic producer if you want to produce good comics. And the vice versa is that as someone who, if you're not a storyteller but you're just an artist, you need to incorporate some of the great ways of storytelling. And really the basic I always go on about storytelling key is that it's a reflection of reality, all these kinds of things. So you need to understand all of these things. So anyways, I'm sorry for going on about this for so long, and I'll get to your comments now and your questions, but really that's something that I've been thinking about a lot this week, and that I need to, incorporate more and more into my making comics and into what I'm going to do moving forward with comics. All right, let's see who was in the chat. I had about 20 people in here at the height. Michael was here. Let's see. Final Fantasy. Vaz, I've said hello to you. Question mark is here. Let's see. I'll also have to start reading some comments besides the fact that I'm just going to say hello to everybody. Edmund is here. Sound Engraver is here. How you doing, Sound Engraver? Yeah, again, I always have to give a shout out to Sound Engraver. She has a great channel. You should go over and check it out. She does what I do, basically looking at pop culture things, but through a musical standpoint. Let's see, scrolling down. Samuel is here. Let's see. The sound's good when Sound Engraver says it's good. That's good to hear. Let's see. Scrolling down. I'll give a little shout out to what does Sound Engraver say here. She says, I'm publishing a video tomorrow morning based on your recent video, RJ, the one where you stress the importance of fighting the good fight in this culture war. Well, that's great to hear. I'm glad I'm inspiring other people to at the very least talk about and inspire others to make good stories and to fight for basically what I would say is the heroic ideal. All right, so scrolling down, let's see. Sound Engraver also says, after many years, it's easy to be sick of. Yes, it's easy to be sick of the culture war after so many years. But yeah, you got to keep on fighting because, as I said in my last video, not only is it worth doing because we get to preserve the things that we love, but at the same time, our winning and our fighting is being happy and enjoying good entertainment and all that kind of stuff, which is not hard if you can find it. So let's see. Breaker is here. How you doing, Breaker? Yes, you're able to catch this live stream. Vaz, as I said, was here, and he has a comment saying, I care for the writer if their first name is Stephanie. Yeah, Vita, Megs, and a few others. I'll skip their work. Well, that's good to know. At the very least, you're being discriminatory. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. You discriminate. You choose between what is good and what is bad. So let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Vaz says, on the other side, when I see certain names, I usually buy. Well, that's good to know. But again, I'm glad. I know, Vaz, you're probably one of those people that I talked about at the first, saying that yeah, there are some people who buy because of the storyteller themselves, but those kinds of people like you are probably few and far between. Right now, most of us probably look at the writer and say, "Am I going to buy this?" Or am I not going to buy this, because you know how much of a, well, how much of a mess they're going to make of the story. You know that by their names already if you're into comics. Let's see. Paulus is here. Says, "Hail, how you doing, Paulus? Very good to see you here." Justin is here. Let's see. Justin says, uh, I gotta click on this 1 second. Peter David has good books on writing and making comics. That's good to know. I'll have to look those up. I wasn't aware of that. Let's see. Scrolling down, Elijah is here. I'm not sure if I said hello to you, Elijah, or not. No, you didn't miss it. I was just late tonight. A lot of things going on. Let's see. Let's see. Scrolling down, Paula says he's not very fond of YouTube's search results. Yeah, I can see why. Just being someone who has to deal with YouTube. Let's see. Oh, it's great to know. Justin says there's some Peter David lectures on YouTube too. That's good to know. Dang it. I meant to, again, as I always do, I mean to have a pen and pencil when I do these live streams so I can copy this stuff down, uh, so that I can actually, do this stuff and look this stuff up when I'm done here. Let's see. Let's see. Sound Engraver says life advice is where everyone and their mother tunes in. It's easy to hear, even if they already know it. I suppose that's a good way of looking at it, Sound Engraver. I hadn't thought of that, but some of those videos talking about making comics are just straight up life advice, and I'm thinking to myself, what does this have to do with making comics? This just has to do with working. But yeah. All right, what else we got? Oh, Taz is here. How you doing? Great to see you here, Taz. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Breaker says, unfortunately, some of this basic knowledge is not heeded by a lot of creators. Look at anything made by Rooster Teeth, for example. Well, I know Rooster Teeth makes Ruby, but besides that, I'm not entirely sure what else they make. I'm not a big fan of Ruby, except for the fact that they have really good character. What do you call it? I'm not fond of their stories or the way that they make the what is it, the shows that they make. But character design, some of their character design is gorgeous. I'll just give it to that. One of those characters was part the inspiration for Disc, a slight part. Disc is two basic, one Marvel and one DC character smushed together, but at the same time, actually, I don't know, it's two comic book characters smushed together with a little bit of one of the characters from Ruby in it, just as a visual, that I gave to Renzo to create that character. So yeah, scrolling down, Breaker also says they write by the seat of their pants and then make the staff later to fill in the gaps. Make the stuff later to fill in the gaps. Sorry. Yes. Not entirely sure that would be the best way to make a show. It sounds very much like a Marvel method, though. Let's see. Incubus says, Incubus Time Lord is here. How you doing? Image Comics in the early 1990s was like that. Great art concepts, but horrible writing executions. Look at Wildcats and Gen 13. Those two are perfect examples of what I'm talking about. Yep, indeed. Gen 13 was not one of those books that I bought from the very first, but it wasn't one of the first titles out, I don't think, with Image. But anyway, yeah, horrible stories, horrible stories. I don't, honestly, people talk about Spawn and how Todd McFarlane did this and that and the other things with his books, and the story was never something that pulled me in. It was always the art. That was it. That was why I was buying things for the most part. Greg is here. How you doing? 1966 to 1985 is Gen X, 1986 to 2005 is Gen Y, and Gen Z is 2006 to 2025. You have the sharp light bulbs in the shed trying to be relevant. Yeah, well, I guess it would be some Gen Y then, because some of these people making comics were probably Gen Y as well as Gen Z. But the people that I'm talking about making videos about making webtoons on YouTube here. Let's see. Question mark says, you do have guidelines for your comic stories. No, so do you have guidelines for your comic stories? Yes, I do. I have guidelines for my universe. I wrote a whole lot of backstory because every comic I make is in the same universe. So even the Crom the Destroyer, it's basically kind of like Marvel did Conan. It's the prehistory of the entire universe. So thousands of years before when the normal stuff is going on. I should put up some stuff in the background again for Crom the Destroyer. And I just lost my place once again on the comments. But give me a second here. I'll go back through question mark. Yes, I do have guidelines for my stories. I wrote a whole bunch of backstory for the original book that I did, the very first, which was Thomas Valiant #1. I always say, or used to say anyways, on my old live streams that I probably made Renzo sick of all the backstory that I wrote because I gave it all to him before he even started the darn thing. So pages of backstory. All of my characters are very much preset. They do develop as we go through the stories, but I have at the very least some um, character skills and character traits and all these kinds of things that are preset before we even begin. And there's a lot of things, again, for my universe that there are limitations, all these kinds of things. I do have a lot of people were saying, you're making your characters too, they look like they're too overpowered to begin with, all this kind of thing. But they may look overpowered, but there are limitations for powers within my universe, all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I have guidelines to my stories. And then on top of that, you have the guidelines for each story itself, which is some of the stuff that I'm going on about on these Wednesday live streams about, how many panels you can get on a page. I have basic guidelines for that. I have basic guidelines for, when you can create a new scene, which is basically you need to have a page turn, all this, which doesn't always happen, but at the very least you try at the very least to do that, all this kinds of stuff. So definitely most definitely question mark. He goes on to say, I guess I should have read the whole comment first. The example I'm thinking of is of Atomic Robos. No angst, no cheesecake, no reboots, no filler. The main main robot punches a different robot. Yes, okay. Sorry. So yeah, I do have a lot of those things. Again, I understand some of these things are basic, but to some extent, I understand where some of these people are coming from with the ridiculous things that they do in mainstream comics right now. The idea of everybody's always eating, it doesn't work within comics because it's a visual medium. It works well within YA novels. You can have people sitting around having a meal and then have a heated conversation. It works there. You can do that there. And again, it's part of a larger story because people have to eat at certain times, keep themselves alive, all that kind of thing. They take it in the completely wrong direction. But yeah, it's that would be one of my things that, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to have people sit around eating because it doesn't work within a visual medium, even though it does have some good ideas in other mediums as a part of storytelling, all these kinds of things. Things like that. Also, some of the basics that I have that you're talking about here, I always try to make beautiful women. I want to bring back beautiful women in comics, but at the same time, there's going to be, again, I guess you would say not cheesecake, but at the same time, you can have stunningly beautiful without pushing cheesecake. You can. That's why I go back to a lot of the visuals for the characters, the female characters that I have are basically from 1930s, 1940s movie starlets and things like that. So you get a lot of this extraordinarily beautiful women, and you're going to get it in a very respectful way. These are the kinds of things that I want to do. So yeah, I have a lot of guidelines like that. And I work within that and what my artists can do as well. So because I do give them some leeway. Let's see. Question mark also says, have you read Unflattering by Nick Sao Senis. No, I have not. It's a very similar to Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics. Have either of these books influenced your work? No, they haven't. I think I might have come across Scott McCloud's, but it's not something that I'm delving terribly into. I want to go back a little farther. Well, I don't know how far back Scott McCloud is, but it's not something that I recognize as very old. It might be. Let me know in the comments. Again, I should be writing these down as people mention them. Let's see. Stress level is here. How you doing, stress level? Great to see you. Let's see. Let's see. Scrolling down. See if I can get through some of these comments. Vaz has a question. RJ, are your artists having any creative helping with your stories? Let me just make sure I'm reading that correctly. Are your artists having any creative helping with your stories? Not just changing a panel or a dialogue line, but a contribution to the whole plot. Yes and no, mostly no. I do have some people who are artists, basically, well, at least one of my artists came back to me with basically a rewriting of my script saying, how about we do it this way? And I went, no, we're not doing it that way. This is my book. Sorry. We're doing it my way. But at the same time, I allow enough of a loose storyline, especially for the longer books, so that we can incorporate stuff from the art into the storyline and it may significantly change the story itself. Because I'll just say here, I had the artist for the main story for Valiant Heroes wanted to change a lot of what I had done after giving him the script, and I just said, I'm sorry, we're not doing that. But at the same time, when Renzo was not writing, but Renzo was doing the art for Thomas Valiant #1. Again, I usually like to work in chunks, probably at the absolute maximum, 20-page chunks, so 20 to 22 pages. So basically a floppy, but they don't always get that much for my artists. That is to say, how much they get for what they're going to be working with at the present time for the story. It's for the longer stories, it would be a chapter instead of a floppy. But anyways, so Renzo did some spectacular work within his character design for some of the characters for Thomas Valiant #1, which was the guards for the room. Basically, they were on monitor duty and they were watching the security, but they were superheroes. And he did such a beautiful job on that in the first part of chapter 2, that it completely changed the rest of the way that chapter 2 was going to go, because I wanted to use those characters more. We already fleshed out as much as possible these character designs that he already made. And so it changed significantly the way that chapter 2 was explained, although it was basically the same plot. Same with Disc, which was one of the major characters within Thomas Valiant #1. Renzo did a visual of her, and some other artists as well that I was working with. They did some visuals with her, and I'm not sure that it basically came from a misunderstanding of what I was actually trying to go with for the character, but they put in powers that were not very different, but had a very different outcome that I was going for. And I just decided, let's go with it, because that power set that these two artists were working with and trying to incorporate into the style of the character, it was so much something as an addition, a beautiful addition to the character. So yeah, I do allow for changes in that way. So it is something that again, since I work in a very loose way, it's not quite a Marvel method, but it is a variation more on the Marvel method than on a DC method, certainly. So I do allow for a lot of changes within the story if my artists can wow me with something that they're going to put down on the page for what I've already written. So that's a long old spiel, but I want to give credit where credit was due, because Renzo has done so much to help flush out that story, and so have my other artists. So scrolling down. Let's see. Stress level says, but RJ, if you do that, won't, but but RJ, if you do that, you won't have time to explain Crom's gender identity. Okay, stress level. Sorry. I really should put my glasses on before I do these live streams so I can read these things better. Thank you. Thank you for that laugh, stress level. Let me put some more Crom the Destroyer up in the background. Actually, since we're talking about Renzo, let's put some of his beautiful art from Thomas Valiant #1 up in the background here. And then I'll see if I get back to stress levels comment in my comments. Where is it? Yeah, we don't care about gender identity here. Let's see. Incubus Time Lord says some people today hate superhero poses, but then again, those people also probably more than likely hate superhero characters in comic books and graphic novels, so you can't take them seriously. Yeah, well, stress level. I mean, sometimes random comments just set me off, and you just did that, stress level. I agree completely with you, stress level. There are people who are in comics and making comics right now. They don't understand not only the basic idea of a superhero and a hero that I'm always talking about, but they don't understand why these superheroes pose in the way that they do. Now, you have, stuff like Batman and Superman coming out from DC right now, and all they do is pose. There is no way all of these poses are going to fit into the story. They're trying to wow you with some art, and then the story suffers for it. No, that's not what I'm talking about. It's ridiculous. You have to actually pose these characters in a dynamic quality. See, you get static pose after static pose. And these people don't understand comics. They don't understand graphic novels. They don't understand sequential art, even if they're beautiful artists at times. They just don't. Or if they do, they're being hampered by the people who are creating the comic, the writers or the producers for Marvel or DC or Image or anything else. It's ridiculous. They don't understand. I was going over, what was it? It was a video that Jim Lee was doing, and he was young, really young in this video, talking about dynamic poses. And one of the ideas, I think he was talking to Rob Liefeld at the same time when he was doing, he was drawing, right? And he said, put in some of that Jim Lee hair as well. Because why? The Jim Lee hair was another extension of the dramatic pose, which gives you senses of movement, all that kind of thing. And then because it was the Image guys talking, you had Todd McFarlane saying at the same time, this is why we have speed lines and movement lines and all these kinds of things to infer movement that you can use with these dynamic poses, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I agree, Incubus Time Lord. These people do not understand. And this is part of what I'm trying to do here with these videos and talk about comics and making comics and the appreciation of what goes into making a comic, that there is such a deeper level always with great comics and great comic storytelling. And these people today, a lot of them, and that would include a lot of these people making web comics or all these things that you see popping up in the internet, they just don't understand sequential art. And if they do, when you put the top layer of a hero onto that and dynamic poses and movement, they don't understand that. So again, I mean, I can tell you right now, I don't understand the entire thing, but at the very least, I'm trying every week to learn something new. That's why I do these videos in part, to talk about what I learned new or thought about new about making comics. So I wish people making comics would do the same. Well, in a perfect world, in a, we'll say 1980s world of making comics, they already understood this long before they ever got into making comics. But that's not the world we live in today. Breaker says, now I think about it, kendo and fencing have quite a few similarities. No wonder fights with katanas and rapiers are exaggerated. Well, again, that is something that, I like to look at these kinds of things. I agree. You need to look at stuff like this if you're going to incorporate sword fighting into you're making a comic. This is one of the things, like Jim Shooter talked about this many times when he created some of his first characters for Legion of Superheroes. He put in, what was it? Karate Kid was one of his creations. And it was like 1965 or something. They created Karate Kid. And the reason why he wanted to create that character was because he was tired of having characters that had, as he called them, pointy powers, because they would just point at something and then something would happen with their powers. So he wanted a more dynamic pose and movement within those comics. And so he said he learned so much about karate because he had to, because in order to create that character, he had to understand how it worked and how he could put it down on the page, all these kinds of stuff. So yeah, um, talking about kendo and fencing, all that kind of stuff. These are things you need to delve into if you're going to write a comic where the character that you have in a center focus of your book has a sword in their hand. So yeah, go back to Jim Shooter and his way of talking about and creating great new characters. Let's see. Scrolling down. Oh, Taz, thank you very much. Taz has given me £5 super chat. Thank you very much. I hope your Indiegogo campaign is going smoothly. Well, most of the campaigns right now, they're still up so that you can still order, but they've slowed to a trickle, to say the least. So, and I'm not spending as much time trying to put out material and go on other people's shows to sell them. We're getting down to, we need to get these things published right now. So hopefully I'll keep my hand in with those Indiegogo campaigns. But thank you very much, Taz, for the super chat. Thank you profusely. Let's see. Scrolling down. Breaker says, basically, don't aim to become a one-man band, but expand your skills appropriately. That's a good way to put it. Great way to put it, Breaker. Thank you very much. Let's see. Scrolling down. Elijah says, I bought Kit Fox, RJ. Make it worth it. Well, first of all, Elijah, I did see that you bought Kit Fox. Thank you very much. And the book is already done. I don't know if you were here at the first of the live stream, but the book is done. Lettering is now done. I had to, again, I took some of just as I was talking about, I had my script, and then Renzo gave me all of the art, and we got that art colored. And then I rewrote some of the script to incorporate some of the stuff that Renzo had put into the art, not heavy changes, but simple changes. And then I gave that script to Eric to do the lettering. And then we put in, there was still some script edits to go into that at the same time, but we're done. We're done of all that. And it's going to the printers fairly soon. So yeah, thank you very much, Elijah. Thank you to everybody who orders anything from my campaigns. So links for those are in the descriptions for anybody who wants to know. Let's see. Tony, how you doing? He says, do you think that when DC loses the trademark on Superman and Batman, we'll finally start to get good stories with those characters? I don't know. I think that we really might. But what I think that a more appropriate way to do it is to almost use those characters as mythology. It's a better way to create new stories, and that way you can have new characters and new parts of a world. That if you use, say, Superman and Batman as if they were mythological characters, or at the very least mythological in the recent memory of people in that world, it would be probably the better way to do it. So it won't be stories that are focusing on Batman and Superman, but at the very least, it will be directly inspired stories. That's what I think. Let's see. Scrolling down. Robert, how you doing? Great to see you here in the chat. Let's see. Sound Engraver says, see if I can get to the bottom of these comments. Yeah, those comic makers on Life Advice is strange. I agree. They have some strange things to say. Let's see. Greg says, each dollar is a bullet. You give your bullets to your enemies, they'll use them against you. Doesn't matter if you think in terms of enemy or not. That's a good point to bring up. Let's see. Scrolling down. Yes, Robert says that's deep. Yes, it very much. Greg is a deep person. I've learned that from his comments on my regular videos and through the super chat. Scrolling down. Let's see. Vaz says, the thing I can agree by "no one cares about you as a writer" is when they try to self-insert themselves and their life outside their window in the story. So yeah, um, that's yeah, that I didn't think of it in those terms, Vaz, but yeah, that is something that should probably be um, told to the people who write for Marvel and DC. No one cares because that's what they're telling them. Basically, they're shoveling this nonsense into their mind that everybody cares about you and your identity markers, and that's why you got hired here to write these stories. Therefore, put yourself down on the page. No, no one cares about you and your identity markers. No one even cares about you as a writer. So you best put yourself into the team mentality and start writing a good story along with everybody else. I think that'd be a good kick in the pants to give everybody at Marvel and DC these days. Scrolling down to Tony, let's see. What are your thoughts on one of comics' original edgy boys, Howard Chaykin? Uh, what did Howard Chaykin do, anyways? I can't even remember stories of his off the top of my head. You have to talk to me, Tony, about more about some of the stories that he did. Again, because for me, you know, um, yeah, they're all connected to stories. Everything's connected visual for me. So tell me about a story, and then I can visualize it, and then I can probably because I know Howard Chaykin's name certainly, but I don't remember off the top of my head what stories that he would have done. So I can't give you an answer to that question. Let's see. Breaker's talking to Vaz. Let's see. Scrolling down a little bit. People are talking about self inserts in comics. Let me put up some more stuff in the background. Give me 1 second here. I put up some Renzo stuff for the Valiant Heroes because it's talking about Renzo. And let's put up some more Crom the Destroyer. Let's see, show that in the background. Then I'll get back to my comments. See if I can find where I was in the comments. Unfortunately, I always say this, and it's a real pain in my behind, but whenever I go to the other screen to put more video up in the background, I lose completely where I was in the comments because it just jumps on me. Let's see. Scrolling down, scrolling up to find out where in the world I'm at. A lot of people, again, oh, here we are. Scrolling through a lot of conversation about self insert. So I don't think most of that is for me. Sound Engraver says, it's bad enough seeing characters eat. Can you imagine hearing them eat? Yeah, no, I don't want to do that. I watch this. Oh, I have these funny things that I watch on YouTube sometimes. There's a channel called, what is it called? Is a husband and wife, and they watch movies together. What in the name of it? It's Mr. and Mrs. Movies. Anyways, I can't remember what the name of their channel is off the You, Me, and the Movies. That's it. Anyways, the woman, the wife of the pair, she can't stand the movies where she can hear people eating. I remember they watched what was it, The Burbs, and you hear the guy eating all the time in the first of the movie, one of the characters, and she just couldn't listen to it. So yeah, I would be completely on board with, yeah, that would drive me insane, Sound Engraver. I I do not want to hear any of that. No, thank you very much. Let's see. Scrolling down, stress level says cheesecake can be for the eventual Rule 34. Yeah, we'll concentrate on just plain old beautiful women. That's what I'm gonna do. Let's see, scrolling down. Da, da, da. Incubus Time Lord. I'm not entirely sure this is for me, but I'll read it out and see if it is. People are so round up tight these days that even early 1960s pictures of Jane Mansfield would be considered too much fan service. Well, I mean, I let me put it this way. There is nothing wrong. You're looking at some of the beautiful art from Jim O'Reilly in the background with some of these female characters. There's nothing wrong with the female form. I certainly don't ascribe to any of this nonsense that they put out within Marvel and DC right now. So you're going to see beautiful women in my books, certainly. And you're going to see them in, Phantasm. That was one of the biggest sellers. I think it was the biggest seller for all of the posters that I sold with the first Thomas Valiant book was Phantasm, and she's standing there in an evening dress. I mean, it's a not skimpy, but at the same time, it doesn't cover too much that she's completely covered over, to say the least. You can see her back and her shoulders and her legs and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was a beautiful woman. It was a picture of a beautiful woman. It was done by Nick Axe. It was great, and it sold like hotcakes. That was one of my biggest sellers that I probably have to bring back again, because she's based on Myrna Loy. I guess Myrna Loy would probably be 20s and 30s and 40s for her acting. She was in she was the wife in The Thin Man. If someone's looking for a reference for what she has been in, that would probably be her most notable role for me, anyways. But yeah, beautiful women, and you can do that without cheapening the entire thing. I guess we'll put it that way. Let's see, scrolling down. Question mark says, check out Scott McCloud's 3 books, Understanding Comics, Making Comics, and Reinventing Comics. Very inspiring books. Thanks for the live stream. Well, thank you very much for telling me about those books. I will have to put them on my list. Question mark. Let's see. Scrolling down. Breaker says, if I can pull this up onto the main screen, the least they could do is make them do poses from JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. JoJo. I'm aware of the memes for JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. That's about it. Let's see. Scrolling down. Rex is here. How you doing, Rex? Sorry that I'm late to the party. I just wanted to ask one thing before I call it a night. What is your ideal length for a fight scene? I know talking is a no-go. Whew, that is an interesting question, Rex. Honestly, I think that has to be organic, and I don't think there is a length for that is going to be a hard and fast rule for these things. There was a beautiful let me put it this way. There is a 1986-ish, if I remember correctly, annual for Thor. I think it was right in the middle of Walter Simonson's run. And there was a 6 to 8 page story that was a backup story for that annual. And it was Thor versus Hercules. And basically the entire 6 to 8 pages, I can't remember how much it was, but the entire thing was just battle. That was it. And they didn't even talk. There was some narration, but I don't think there was even any speech bubbles or thought bubbles at all in that entire thing, if I remember correctly. But yeah, that was a battle. And even at the end of the what was it, 6 or 8 pages, the narrator had to apologize because they needed more pages because they were still fighting. So, but I mean, that would be because you have a contest between these two gods in that realm, in that storyline. So that would be both of them indestructible, both of them at the same power level. What are you going to do? It's going to be an extended battle. So if you can make it a good part of the story, you can have an extended battle. I would say one of the things that I would like to do at some point, and you got a little bit of this in Thomas Valiant #1, is to have an extended battle where people just get worn down, and you see people getting wounded and getting, but both sides, if you have one combatant against another and they're fairly evenly matched, you can have a drawn out, just horrendous battle between these two characters and draw it out and still have massive amounts of storytelling put in there, even through their movements, things like that. Again, but at the same time, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, battle scene that I've ever seen within comics is in the Paul Smith run of X-Men from the 1980s, where you have Silver Samurai and Wolverine. I did an entire video about that fight scene, actually, and it lasted probably 2 pages, I think. So, it was concise, and it was very Paul Smith, with very little for the background, and the movements for these characters where you're able to follow them. And it was perfect, if you ask me. So again, it depends on what kind of story you're telling. So I don't think there's any hard and fast rules for Rex, honestly. Scrolling down. Let's see. Samuel says, I always think I'm getting to the end of the chat, and then the entire thing jumps on me because it says, oh no, you have another 20 comments. Samuel says, the fourth age, when do you plan on closing the campaign? For what? I imagine for Crom the Destroyer. Yeah, I think you're talking about, because they have two open campaigns right now, which is the Valiant Heroes and Crom the Destroyer. I think I might be able to fit it in my budget soon after all. Well, again, I don't know the answer to that question, honestly. We're trying to, me and some of the other people that I'm working with right now, we're trying to get a web page up that is also going to serve as a storefront so that we might not have to use Indiegogo anymore. At the very least, we'll be selling some of those books as, we'll say, you're able to get the older ones that I've already sold, like Thomas Valiant #1 and things like that. So how long the campaigns are going to be up, I don't know. But the perk right now for ordering from the campaigns, and not waiting until I get other things up, is that you get the stretch goals for the campaigns if you order from a lot of what you're going to get for, I think it, well, I guess you have the ability to access some perks. I guess we'll put it that way. It's not really the stretch goals. I guess that's not really a part of it, but it's more you can access some of the perks for posters and things like that, which you're not going to get always on every campaign or even in the stuff that I'm going to sell at the storefront. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that question, Samuel, because I really don't know. A lot of things are at play right now that might affect when we're going to close down. I would say you have at least for Thomas Valiant a month or two to buy that book. For Crom the Destroyer, that might be the same, but I'm not entirely sure. All right, scrolling down. Let's see. They're never going to lose those IPs. Talking about the IPs for Superman and Batman. Yeah, there's going to be probably some kind of battle go on to try to keep those IPs under wraps in some way. But we'll see. We'll see how the future unfolds. Scrolling down, Breaker says Superman, the animated series, has an episode where, in the future, Superman is the inspiration for an entire superhero culture that brought peace to the galaxy. Well, that's kind of the storyline for Legion of Superheroes, right? The entire inspiration for the Legion of Superheroes in continuity in universe for how those entire stories were created was Superman. They looked at historical videos which were able to survive over the 1,000 years between them and made their entire culture based upon that. So it is something they've done over and over again. So yeah, that's the kind of idea that I'm thinking about, as well as using those characters as mythology. Scrolling down. Robert says, I have Batman the animated series. I should get Superman the animated series. So I guess that comment wasn't for me, but great to hear that people are getting more and more into superheroes, if you ask me. Let's see. Scrolling down. Oh, there we go. Howard Chaykin, American Flag and Black Hawk. So American Flag, I never really liked that book very much. I can tell you right now. Black Hawk, I did follow it for a little while. None of these books were anything that I would spend much of my money on, quite honestly. American Flag, I know people, because I was there when the first American Flag came out and stuff like that. Is very much, I'm not sure where Chaykin is from. He might be one of the British invasion guys. I really don't know. But a lot of, if he wasn't, he was very much in the vein of, Judge Dredd and things like that. And, Alan Moore and a lot of these guys who came in from England and trying to reinvent or deconstruct the American superhero. That would be my take on what Chaykin was doing with American Flag, which again, I don't like deconstruction. And the destruction of heroes is counterproductive to the American comic book industry, if you ask me. This is parcel of, now, not to slight other countries or other parts of the world and the way that they can be heroic and all that kind of stuff, but I think it's bred in the bone of North America. that heroes and heroic individuals, because basically, the expanding of the frontier and the rugged individual and all that kind of thing. The heroic ideal is part and parcel of the mindset of a North American individual. And so it is something that you want to come in from England, if that's where you're from, and deconstruct our heroes. No, get out of my face, get out of my country. I don't want you here. I don't want you in my comics. That would be my take on the entire thing, because you're trying to chip away at the very heart of America, if you ask me. But anyway, scrolling down, and I went on about that because I think that's partly what Jacob was doing with the American flag. Scrolling down, let's see. Robert says, I like to own physical media. Clouds evaporate eventually. Yes, I completely agree with that. I just bought a whole bunch of older movies over the weekend. Did a lot of yard sailing and found this lady who had this massive pile of science fiction movies. And I just went, okay, I'm spending a lot of money here, but I could buy them for $1 a piece. So, I just came home with a boatload of stuff. So I agree. I hate the idea of things on a cloud that can be messed with. I want my physical media. Scrolling down. Let's see. I got Breaker talking to Robert. World's Finest. Robert says World's Finest was great. I'm not sure if you're talking about World's Finest because I think there's some cartoons for World's Finest. The World's Finest comics, again, I would go with. I love the World's Finest comics in some of the older DC continuity, if you're asking about those kinds of things. Let's see, scrolling down again. It just jumped on me. We're coming up to an hour and 20 minutes, so I'm going to try to get through some of these comments with speed. Sound Engraver says Helm's Deep is an amazing sequence for film. I can imagine the same level of quality for a graphic novel. Yeah, extended battle scenes. Yeah, Helm's Deep. That would be exactly something like that. But again, I would think that you'd have to have spectacular artists to pull something like that off, like a Paul Smith. Again, the simplicity of that fight scene that I was talking about, that short one, is in a very Paul Smith way, although he probably didn't have control over it. It was Chris Claremont at that time, but at the same time, it played into his art and all these kinds of things. So there are a lot of factors go into how much you can put into a battle scene. Let's see, scrolling down. What do you think of a story idea where the good guy is a champion of death, which would be treated as a natural thing, while the villain is one who perverts life? I don't know. I don't think. I don't think anything that. Well, I don't know. Sorry, is it Darcy? Darcy. I think that is. For me, anyways, and my tradition that I've been brought up in, and really the basis of Western civilization, death is always evil. So if you work for death, that is also evil. So that's why I never really got into, what was the name of that anime? I can't remember, where all of the guys are servants of death in some way. There was an anime. I can't remember what it is. Since I didn't watch it, I don't remember the title off the top of my head. But anyways, I didn't watch it because, again, the characters were servants of death. And I was like, death is evil. There's no two ways about that. So you're a servant of death, you're a servant of what is evil, so you're not heroic. That's just a simple equation that happens in my mind. But the other part of that equation, which you talked about, is that the villain is someone who perverts life. That is an extremely relevant topic right now, and someone should do a story like that. That is very much in the mind's eye of what we have going on right now within our culture, because you have so many people perverting what is true into falsehood. And that is the exact same thing which would happen in that story. So that would be a wonderful story to tell, if you ask me. Let's see. Sound Engraver says, sequence for battle, no dialogue. Again, that was the Paul Smith one. That would have to be probably shorter rather than longer with the no dialogue for some of those. Let's see, scrolling down. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. So Robert says the John Wick school of fight scene duration. Some of those dragged on just a little bit too long, if you ask me. Within the, I guess, not so much within the first one, but within the second and third, that they kind of dragged on, if you ask me. Scrolling down. Oh, question mark is still here. I thought he was taken off. He says, "Do you have any suggestions for books?" I'm not entirely sure this question is for me, but we'll see. For books, sources that cover the visual language of comic marks like speed lines and stuff, like Mort Waller's, what is it, Grolix? Honestly, the only thing that comes to my mind off the top of my mind is to get Will Eisner's stuff. I don't think he talks so much about speed lines, but he does talk about the kind of mentality for sequential art that plays into that. I can't remember if he does or not talk about speed lines. He might talk about it in one of his books, but yeah, I'd go back to Will Eisner if you ask me. He would cover the basics of incorporating that kind of thing at the very least into the artistic movement and all that kind of stuff. And it does it in an extremely logical and rational way, which again, this is why I like his older stuff rather than some of the newer stuff that's coming out, because they do it in the way that basically they see it, not in a logical and rational way. It's very confusing sometimes. Let's see, scrolling down. Holy Moses. Um, it just jumped to me again. I realized I got another 20 comments to get through. Rex says, I used to be into Transformers, but IDW Publishing did a lot of deconstruction on the franchise that left a bad taste in my mouth under John Barbar. Lots of tearing everything down. Yeah, again, that's part of what I'm going to talk about this weekend about that rant. I think it was it Dan Slott went on about you can't destroy characters. Yeah, you can destroy them. You can definitely destroy them. But we'll talk about that on this weekend, I think. Let's see. Samuel says the fourth age. I got to hit this to bring it up on my screen. Sounds good. I guess I won't have to worry about missing buying Crom too late. No, Crom should be up for a little while later. But again, if you want any of the things that go with Crom, some of those might not be available later on. Like the fact that the original campaign, we had a couple of things which are still no longer available now, like the Iron Age magazine that you can get signed by me, which has one of the Crom stories in it, the extra Crom stories, all that kind of stuff. So some of the things do disappear as perks. But you will be able to get the book itself right up until the campaign closes. Again, I don't know when that will be though. Scrolling down, Rex says, also, RJ, when you mash characters together for Thomas Valiant, did you have certain parameters in mind? No, I didn't really have parameters in mind when I was smushing characters together. I just wanted to, I don't know. I had an idea for a character. I was kind of working backwards, Rex, at that point, which was I wanted to get into the story as quickly as possible. And I talked about this many times. And I find that a lot of indie comic producers right now spend way too much story on backstory, way too much of their comic on backstory, and it gets boring. And most people, especially with the short attention spans they have right now, are just not going to go through that or think it's a good story, and they're just going to put the book down. So I decided to start with action right away. And in order to do that, I needed to visually code my characters so that even though you don't have an introduction per se that is going to lead up to, oh, I understand who this character is, you had action from panel 1, page 1, and it started with a battle. You can visually, if you have any knowledge of comic book characters, see where these characters are tied to and who they are from the way that they're basic powers are going to be shown on the page. So Thomas Valiant, you're going to automatically, someone will think of Mr. Fantastic or Plastic Man, and or depending on whether or not you're Marvel or DC or from the movies or from the comics. And so what I tried to do was incorporate usually a larger character and a smaller character. So a character for the visual, which told the story by their powers already, so I didn't have to explain it, and then tie in a smaller character, or characters sometimes, and that would be part of what I was doing. So I guess the question would be yes. The answer to your question would be yes. Like Thomas Valiant has, again, you might see more of Mr. Fantastic than Plastic Man, although there's probably more Plastic Man ish within his powers. But at the same time, I tied in another DC character, which I'm probably not going to tell anybody about. But there's also a hint of Nick Fury in there, again, because he was a soldier and a spy. You learn that from chapter 2. And then we threw in a dash of Gelatinous Cube from Dungeons and Dragons as part of his power set. So, there's a lot of things like that. It's basically goes with the story, Rex. And the parameters are how much is this going to contribute to the story, I guess you want to put it that way. Let's see, scrolling down. No, it wasn't Calliope. The story, it wasn't Death Note, because there's actual heroes in Death Note, if you ask me, because Light was the villain. He's a servant of death at that time. But L and who is it? I can't remember. Let's see. There's two detectives, and I can't remember both of their names, although they're just letters at the top. But they have the detectives hunting him down. Those are the heroes, even though they're not, the traditional idea of a hero, in some ways and things like that. So there is a bit of heroism in that book, if you ask me. And the villain gets his comeuppance in the end. Let's see, scrolling down, but that wasn't the book or the anime that I was talking about. Let's see, scrolling down. I'm getting to the end of the comments. Let's see. No, it wasn't Bleach. Was Bleach? I don't think, for as much as Bleach as I watched, I don't know. I don't remember. I was into. The problem was I was watching it on, I don't know what channel it was, but they did the first 3 seasons, and then all of a sudden they skipped to the 7th season, and it was like, whoa, wait a second here. What about the other 2 seasons? Because this was back in the time where you couldn't get it anywhere else except for, well, I couldn't get it anyways, except for watching it on television. So it's like I dumped that after that point and didn't really watch Bleach much after that. So I don't remember if there was a tie to the Hollows, to some kind of metaphysical reality, but I don't remember if it had anything to do with death. So no, it wasn't Bleach either. Let's see. Scrolling down. Says Howard Chaykin is an American comic book artist and writer. Chaykin's influences include his one-time employer and mentor, Gil Kane. He also did a lot of DC and Marvel books. Okay, so yeah, I don't remember Chaykin doing the early DC and Marvel books. If Gil Kane is his mentor, that is good for him, because that would be a spectacular person to have mentor you. Although Gil Kane himself, when you read a lot of the older, we'll say the older interviews with people, he was a spectacular artist, but kind of rubbed some people the wrong way. Although again, he is a spectacular artist. But I don't remember Chaykin's early stuff besides, American Flag. American Flag, I remember distinctly, and things like that. So I don't remember any of his runs in DC. Scrolling down, let's see. We have someone else here in the chat. Faye, or is it Furfur? Furfur, how you doing? Great to see you here in the chat. Scrolling down, see if I can get to these last couple of comments. Rex says, I heard plenty of creators in recent decades try to go away from the death is evil approach and portray death and death's gods as more neutral, being just doing a job. Well, that might be, I agree that, probably when you get Neil Gaiman's Sandman and the death there, that character sort of was portrayed in a positive light and things like that. But I'm sorry, Western civilization says death is evil. That's where I'm always going with that, as far as I'm concerned, for my stories anyways. Let's see. Yes, Breaker, you're right. Breaker, ding ding ding, has the answer to the question right here. It's Soul Eater. Soul Eater is the anime that I was thinking about. You are correct. Let's see. Breaker also says, RJ, I think Soul Eater is the manga you're thinking of. Yes. Yes, indeed it is. Scrolling down. Question mark says, thanks. I just found some, let me put that up so I can read it better. Some great Eisner books on the visual language for comics. Again, some of the Eisner stuff I think you can borrow through Internet Archives as well. So you might be able to get some there. Let's see. Greg says, I'm having a great chat with everybody tonight. Hopefully you don't mind being here. I got 28 people in the chat. Great to see that. RJ, these people are death cultists nowadays. Well, a lot of them are evil people. Most always believe themselves righteous. Agree completely, Greg. Again, Greg is a deep thinker. So I wouldn't have thought of that from the comments here, but you are correct. There is a great book, again, if you want to. A lot of people always ask me about some of the things that we'll say, philosophical and / theological way of looking at some of the things that I look at. And there's a great book, if you don't mind theological. It's called The Architects of the Culture of Death. That's a great book. It's fairly thick, but it goes through, it goes through a lot of different kinds and different thinkers and producers of even entertainment and things like that over the last little while. And it does a chapter on each of them, talking about how, they're architects, all these people from philosophers to these people who basically goes into, even there's a chapter on Vogue and things like that. They're death cultists and they're promoting a culture of death. So completely agree, Greg. Scrolling down. Ugh, I keep on jumping in my replies to the chat. Let's see. Sound Engraver says, are you RJ ? Are you really getting to the end of the comment? What did I just say before I read that? It appears not, Sound Engraver. Let's see. Scrolling down. Breaker says, Bleach has a lot of filler, so skipping certain seasons won't hurt. That would be episodic storytelling. There's Aristotle would not agree about it being a good story. Then let's see. Sound Engraver's statement is still making me laugh. Samuel says, Gil Kane overappreciation alert. Gil Kane overappreciation alert. Well, the thing about Gil Kane is that, honestly, he is more a traditional illustrator than, not to say that he can't. He did sequential art beautifully, but at the same time, a lot of people saw him as more of an illustrator. If you go back to, like, I would say, if you listen to some of the comments from people like, what is it? Off the top of my head, I'm trying to dig up who the heck was doing that interview at the time. I think it might have been Jack Kirby, but at the very least, you'll see massive differences between Kane's DC portrayal of things and the Marvel dynamism that you get from somebody like Jack Kirby or things like that. So that's all really. I do appreciate Gil Kane. Trust me, I do. But his stuff is very, very much rooted in illustration, if you ask me. Calliope says, in a lot of Western literature, trying to cheat death is a sin that destroys the soul. Even Anakin Eli, because he would not accept death when it was a time for Padme. Okay. All right. So that could be. I'm really not that much up on the lore of the newer Star Wars. But we go back to things like Dorian Gray. You would certainly see things like that there. Scrolling down. Let's see. Breaker says, yeah, sorry, Breaker. I forgot RJ's chat doesn't hide delete comments. No, it doesn't. Sorry. If anything was just for me, I apologize. If you're trying to do chat just for me, but no, it doesn't. It shows me everything. You can't delete it. I am in full control of the horizontal and the vertical. Tony says, what are your thoughts on Steve Ditko's objectivism? obsession. Quite honestly, I will laud Steve Ditko in the fact that he did some very beautiful art and all that kind of stuff. I don't think he understood ob- Ayn Rand's objectivism as it actually was a philosophy. I really don't. I don't think. I'll just put it this way, and I'll just come out and say it. I don't think he was bright enough to understand um, objectivism as because he was going on basically Randian objectivism. I don't think he was bright enough to understand it as it actually was in existence. I think he had a rosy-eyed, rose-colored glasses way of looking at it that wasn't the actual philosophy itself, and he came up with his own sort of pseudo philosophy understanding of what objectivism itself is. And that's what he put down on the page. I'll just say that. Scrolling down, let's see. Calliope says, I missed the first hour. YouTube is making me mad. Yeah, YouTube makes me mad a lot of the time. All right, scrolling down, see if we can get to, let's see. Stress level. Can you explain why death is evil? Well, I can explain why death is evil in Western society. It's because Western society is based upon Christianity. Christianity is based upon the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden was supposed to be where Adam and Eve lived and never died. That was the way they were created. It wasn't until evil came into the picture that they actually um, took death into their nature. So that's why death is connected to evil within Western civilization. So it's basically back to the Garden of Eden. If you want to go for all the Western civilization way of looking at it. Rex says, Greg Welsom's portrayal of Egyptian god Anubis is a more neutral character in an episode of the 90s Gargoyles. All are equal in death. The character works, not mine. The character's words, not mine. Oh, okay. I wasn't very much into Gargoyles, so I'm not familiar with that character. Anubis would, as far as I'm concerned, that would be an evil god. But anyways, let's see. So fireflies? I'm not entirely sure if you've been here before, but welcome to the chat. It says high fantasy versus low fantasy. Which is more interesting setting to you? Could be sci-fi or fantasy. I did an entire video. I think it was probably stretched over into 2 videos. I don't know if you've seen those in my normal video collection for my channel. It, I think, has the thumbnail of what is it? It's a Death Star chasing the Starship Enterprise, if I remember correctly. But anyways, yeah, low fantasy for me all the way. Although I do appreciate high fantasy, low fantasy is what not only we need to get back to right now, a more grounded way of looking at fantasy, because it's just gotten too much into try to create a world unto yourself, and then it breaks the rules of storytelling itself, which is a reflection of reality and a good solid rhetorical argument. But low fantasy is the way to go, if you ask me. It's why I love the Robert E. Howard stories. It's very much low fantasy. But yeah, if you want to hear my take on that, I have probably an hour's worth of video talking about that within my normal videos, probably about 4 months ago that I made those videos. Scrolling down, see what we got here. Hopefully I'm not going to miss anybody's comments. Some of these things I'm not entirely sure if they're for me or not, so I apologize. There's a lot of chat in the chat with people and each other, so I'm going to scroll down past some of that. Let's see. Samuel says, The Fourth Age. That was an in-joke from a comic stream I watched. Sirens go off and everything. It's funny because there isn't anyone in the stream who doesn't love Kane. Okay. Good to know. Let's see. Scrolling down. Yes, Breaker, you're right. None of your comments are getting deleted. I see everything. Let's see. Sound Engraver says, bear with me, RJ. I want to give you a super chat so bad for your epic stream, but the wedding is 3 weeks and we have a long way to go and things to pay for 4 streams now. Don't you worry, Sound Engraver. You want to get married and make your wedding the best, you go right ahead. Save your money. Trust me, you need all the money you can get when you're starting a new life with somebody. In case anybody doesn't know what Sound Engraver is talking to, she is engaged to Professor Geek, and they are getting married fairly soon. So congratulations, Sound Engraver, on that. And once again, you can relay my congratulations to Professor Geek as well. And hopefully it is going to be a beautiful wedding for the two of you. Let's see. Scrolling down. Greg says, I prefer the Grey Mouser. I don't know where that comment came from, but I love the Grey Mouser. How do you say the name? Is it Farfel or Farfred? I can never remember. I say Farfel in my mind. Farfel and the Grey Mouser. Yeah, I absolutely loved those characters, and there's portrayals of those characters from D&D artists to what is it, or is it Magnola, which the graphic novel that came out from DC or Marvel, I can't remember. It was actually a series of graphic novels. I think there was 4 in that. That was great as well. All those characters are great. Even at Walter Simonson doing the 2 characters within the old fantasy for DC. So yeah. I don't know where that comment came from, Greg, or who you're replying to, but the Grey Mouser, great character, and some great stories attached to it. Let's see. I am finally getting to the end of this chat. And scrolling down. Let's see. I think I've gotten to the end of the chat. So I want to thank everyone for coming. We've got 29 people in the chat right now. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. As always, the links are in the description for my graphic novels. You can pick up both Thomas Valiant and the Valiant Heroes at the Valiant Heroes Indiegogo page. Once you buy the Valiant Heroes, you can then tag on Thomas Valiant #1 as an extra if you want to do it that way. Also, the link there is for Crom the Destroyer. We are moving on with printing for the Valiant Heroes right now. Kit Fox is done. And I'm going to get that shipped off to the printers fairly soon. We're working on the second one, which is almost done. We'll be done within the next couple of weeks, just as give you some idea where we're on with that campaign. And for Crom the Destroyer, we're continuing to move with that as well. I did, unfortunately, one of the things I'll have to announce here, I was looking to get another Crom the Destroyer story published in Iron Age magazine #3, because there is a Crom the Destroyer 1 published in Iron Age magazine #2, but they didn't pick up my story for that for Iron Age #3, so I may ship that one around to other publishers to see if they will publish it as well. If not, I might just add it to the perk if you ordered the Morning Light story from Crom the Destroyer. If you got that perk, I would just might stick that in there as well, and you might get an extra story out of that. Just a little thank you for people who want to see my writing. Again, that's how I started this stream. About very few people actually appreciate you as a writer. But yeah, I might do that as well. And I'm going to, as always, give you an outro of the second short 45-second trailer for Crom the Destroyer. And again, the link for that is in the description. Thank you very much to everybody who has been here and everybody for their super chat. Taz, thank you very much for your super chat as well, once again. And I will see you all again next week, or maybe on the weekend. Again, we'll continue this conversation with some of the things I talked about on the weekend. I'll see you all later. Bye.
No matter how many wars you fight, no matter how much blood you shed, no matter how much rage you loose, no matter how many demons you face, no matter how many companions you lose, no matter if our kingdom falls, I know that you will return to me in honor.